Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Expert Advice Q&A on the Student Doctor Network. I'm Emil Chuck, Director of Advising Programs and Editor-in-Chief. For years, the Student Doctor Network community has supported aspiring health professionals in realizing their dream of becoming healers in their communities. The topic of post-baccalaureate options is popular among our forum community. So we have posted an admissions guide on choosing a post-bac or master's program. But for this recorded session, I'm asking experts who work with post-bac students in their journey to medical school. So today I have the pleasure of presenting Susan Lawrenz-Smith from Northwestern Health Sciences University in Bloomington, Minnesota, and Bob Rarig from Temple University in Philadelphia. We're recording this conversation on April 3rd, 2026. We're going to start with a brief presentation from them, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So if you're looking for a post-baccalaureate program, we're going to present to you the nomenclature, the jargon, design features of post-bac and special master's programs, and considerations to help you choose the best program for you. And so with that, Susan and Bob, take it away.
Well, thank you, Emil. I'm Susan Lawrenz-Smith, and Bob and I also are chairs of a postbac committee. And so one of the things we want to talk about in this is the nomenclature. There's a number of terms that are used and I would say used a little sloppily. And so a lot of times that's confusing for students in terms of what they're looking at. So a post-baccalaureate program is anything after your bachelor's degree. Technically, right? So anything after you finish your BS or BA. If we're looking at post-baccalaureate pre-health programs, so these are programs after your bachelor's where it's going to help you bridge that divide to get to med school, to help prepare you for medical school. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Obviously, there could be programs for other types of post-bac, so we're going to focus on those post-baccalaureate pre-health programs. What are these programs? What do they include? So we're going to try to break this down into three categories. So post-bac programs, which we see here, so these typically offer undergraduate courses. So obviously a course numbered 1 to 4, so 100 to 400 or 1000 to 4000. These are generally going to include the prerequisite courses for medical school, either the recommended or required. That's generally the foundational sciences, chemistry, physics, biology, math, and then some social sciences, so psychology and sociology potentially. Because these are undergraduate courses, they will go into your undergraduate GPA and your undergraduate science GPA. They will all be included with that undergraduate GPA. Typically, these programs do not offer a degree. Sometimes they have a certificate that is associated with them, but there isn't a degree associated with them. They differ in structure in terms of the courses required, if it is more flexible or inflexible, the length, the cost, is it cohort based, how many starts there in a year. There's quite a bit of variability in these types of programs. They may include MCAT prep as part of it. It might be required, it might be an add-on. Typically, either they'll offer a committee letter of recommendation or individual faculty are available for letters of rec. That's pretty typical from a post-bac program. And I would say they typically offer advising. So there are either faculty or staff or faculty and staff who are primary role is to provide advising for those graduate programs, for the application and admission to those graduate programs. There's often limited financial aid or scholarships. Some of the programs do have scholarships that would be very, program dependent. And there is potentially some financial aid available through FAFSA. This is very individual dependent, depending on how much of your FAFSA eligibility you used up as an undergrad. So I think if you're looking at postbacs and you're thinking about money, they would have a FAFSA officer. Speak with them. It's really going to be dependent on your particular circumstances. Second group of programs are called SMPs, or Special Masters Programs. These are a graduate program. They do offer a degree. It is a Master of Science degree. And they're typically affiliated with a medical school or actually housed within a medical school. Many cases, the coursework in this SMP is taken along with first-year medical students. So you may be taking some courses with M1s, and then you might have some additional courses you're taking as part of your SMP or a capstone or something like that. They vary. Some are 1 year long programs, some are 2 year long programs. You do get a degree at the end. And since it's degree granting, there is different eligibility about financial aid because there is a degree. I'm going to caveat anything there that all of these things are changing because of the One Big Beautiful Bill. Many of these programs have a linkage. So they have a linkage to that medical school that they are part of. And so they may offer a conditional interview if you meet particular metrics. Those are typically grades within that program in that year. Some do have a guaranteed admission. So you can almost think of them as like a 5 year long program, 1 year for the master's, and then you move right into medical school. There's a few of those, not very many. Many more of these would have a guarantee or a conditional interview if you met metrics. I don't want to say guaranteed because obviously you have to meet the metrics. Many of these programs do require an MCAT for admission to these programs, so that's something you're going to have to factor in. Keeping in mind that MCAT, once you take an MCAT, it's reported forever. So if you felt you had to retake it, that is something you have to consider. Your grades from an SMP will be graduate grades because this is a master's program. So that is a separate line on the GPA calculations in terms of either ACOMAS or AMCAS. It is not part of your undergraduate GPA, either cumulative or science GPA. And then the last category would be a master's degree. This would be a master's in, as an example, biochemistry, molecular biology, genetics. So it's a specialized science degree. Very often you will need part of that course of study is not only coursework, but it's research and a thesis may be required. Generally speaking, you need a strong GPA in the foundational sciences to gain acceptance to these types of programs. Very typically, lab work and unique and novel research is required. The GPA is a graduate GPA, so it's not going to affect your undergraduate GPA. And pretty typically, there's no linkage to medical schools. Many master's programs will require the GRE for entrance. That might be both the general GRE as well as a topic-specific GPA in terms, let's say, biology, not GPA, GRE, like the biology GRE or the chemistry GRE. The other specialized degree is a master's in public health, well, at least in terms of ones that pre-meds talk about. Masters in public health differ from program to program and within institutions. In many cases, a thesis is required. Some of these are 1 year long programs. Some of these are 2 year long programs. The coursework is not foundational science coursework. It will not help you on the MCAT. It's not chemistry or biochemistry or biology. It's a separate GPA, so it is, again, a graduate GPA. It does not affect your undergraduate GPA. It's not going to make a difference for MCAT. And again, typically there is no linkage to medical schools with that type of degree. So what should you consider when you're looking at these programs, right? Because there's all these different types of programs. What do I need? Do I need a postbac? Do I need a special master's? Do I want to pursue a master's degree? I think you need to start out first off saying, well, what do these different programs offer me? What are the possibilities that I get with these different programs? What's the structure of the program, right? When does it start? How long is it? How many courses? Can I do it part-time, full-time? What type of support is there? What type of academic support? Are there student services available to me? Is there advising available to me? Obviously, I'm really biased speaking as someone who spends a lot of time advising students. I would tell you, look really seriously at advising. It can make the difference of being successful for the next steps, right? Because the end goal isn't a postbac. The end goal is actually to be a practicing physician, which means you have to get into med school and have a residency. Um, what's the Who are the faculty? Are they adjunct mostly? Are they committed and tenured or contracted there? And so is what's their primary purpose? Is teaching an afterthought? Is it mostly research? Is it mostly undergrad or grad, or is it the post-bac community? So look at that seriously. What are your research opportunities? If that's important to you, does that program offer anything? Are there clinical opportunities or shadowing opportunities? And are there linkage agreements with those programs? So again, do they have a linkage to a particular school? If you meet certain metrics, what is the agreement in terms of the linkage? And then I think I'll let Bob take over.
All right, thanks, Susan. Hi, everybody. My name is Bob Rarig. As Emil said, I'm at Temple University. I've been either teaching or advising postbac students since 2012, and I've been director of the postbac programs at CST at Temple for the last 3 years. So that's where I'm coming from background-wise. I also just want to say that, and Susan, please correct me if I'm wrong, but both Susan and I represent undergraduate programs. We don't represent SMPs or masters in terms of, where we work. And so we just want to provide that as context. We're trying to be as neutral and objective here as possible. But, something might slip out, and please understand that we don't speak on behalf of all programs, even of the kind that we run, but particularly not SMPs and masters. Okay. So one of the things I want to walk through, some of this is a little bit of a repeat, but it is important to drive this home. So again, course level, are you taking undergraduate work or are you taking graduate work? Some programs out there might offer a combination, but that is either dwindling or extinct at this point, to the best of my knowledge. In terms of certification, again, master's degrees are only available from graduate programs, as Susan mentioned. The certificate usually comes from undergraduate programs. There are such things as graduate certificates instead of graduate degrees, so be on the lookout for that. And then there's programs that don't offer a certificate at all. These are going to be undergraduate programs where you're just taking undergraduate courses to boost your GPA. Also want to be clear that the certificate is lovely, but it's not going to be a game changer in terms of, are you getting in or not from a postbac program? Professional schools care exclusively about your performance on the coursework and, of course, on that ever nefarious MCAT and other exams. In terms of program design, I want you to understand that full-time, part-time, structured, and unstructured are separate issues. So a structured program could be full-time or part-time. An unstructured program, which I call kind of a la carte programs, or they just kind of let you take whatever you'd like or need, those can be full-time or part-time as well. Don't assume that a full-time program is structured, and don't assume that a part-time program isn't. Okay. And if you're like, well, what does structured mean? I think the easiest way to simplify that is like, is there a deliberate plan behind the design of the program? Is there a certain sequence in which you need to take courses or what you need to do before you do your MCAT prep or something like that? Okay. Learning modality, big X factor in student preferences, more and more. So of course, there's in-person versus online. There's some programs that are hybrid, so a combination of in-person and online. And then, of course, there's programs where you take classes at night. There's classes where you take classes over the weekend. Others are during the week, right? So this is one of the biggest differences between many programs. There's fully online, fully in person, and again, that in-between zone. We all have our personal opinions on what's best regarding that, but it's probably skewed towards the design of our program, so I'll just leave it as the options for now. In terms of entrance tests and requirements, so again, this will vary. As Susan mentioned, the graduate programs are more likely to require an MCAT for that pipeline agreement, that linkage pipeline into a professional school. And some of the career changer postbac programs, so career changer programs are for folks who have taken none of the prereqs before. They might want to see an SAT or an ACT or maybe even a GRE. One of the things I just want to say at this point is please understand, and I think you already know this, but just in case you're new to this landscape, please understand that the M in MCAT stands for medical. It does not stand for postbac. There is no such thing as a postbac program entrance exam. And so the only reason you should take the MCAT is to get the score that's going to get you into medical school. So why am I saying that? Because it sounds like such obvious advice. It's because there are postbac programs / SMP / master's programs that might require you to have an MCAT score for you to be eligible for that program. And what I'm saying is if you have a blank slate on the MCAT, do not ruin that blank slate to get an OK score to get into a non-medical program, planning to take it another time to actually go into medical school, because the number of times that you take the MCAT can drastically impact your overall competitiveness. So if you already have that MCAT score banked and you want to go do a master's program, you have the full buffet of options. If you don't have that MCAT score and you want to do a program that requires an MCAT score before medical school, please do not sit for that MCAT unless you're going to get a score that's good enough for medical school, not just another program. Okay. Hope that's clear. Also want to be clear on what's not provided by postbac programs. Shortcuts / quick fixes. All right. I think there's a lot of rumors among students. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter if you're not doing that well in undergrad. Just to go do a postbac program, it'll be taken care of. It won't just be taken care of. If it is taken care of, you will be the one taking care of it, not the program. Okay. So please understand that. And of course, it doesn't feel like a shortcut because it's an extra year of school, but sometimes people join a postbac program for one of these pipeline agreements, assuming that it's just going to work out. And that's going to be the academic work on top of the application work, not to mention all of the wondering, when am I going to hear, what am I going to hear kind of stuff, in terms of interviewing and, admissions decisions after interviewing. So this is not a shortcut. It's an opportunity to showcase who you are now as opposed to, back in undergrad. And please be ready to take accountability for your success and don't plan on a program doing it for you, which brings us to the second entry here. There is no guarantee of success. Susan did a great job of inventorying, guaranteed acceptance versus conditional acceptances and interviews, those kinds of things. All of those things are conditional. Every program is going to have performance requirements for anything, whether it's conditional or guaranteed. And it's not the program's job to provide you with your success. It is your job to make the most of the opportunity in that program to showcase that you are ready to move forward. Okay. Student motivation, huge X factor. If you're not motivated, please don't apply to these programs until you are. And it's okay if that's going to take some time, but odds are real good you're just burning time, money, and energy if you're just heading into a program looking for something to do, even if you're not motivated. This should be attacked like you are ready to showcase who you're going to be in medical school, not just, kind of slap a patch on some aspect of your application profile. And of course, dedication and accountability, that's got to come from you folks. Programs are going to be dedicated towards supporting you and helping you towards your goal, but they cannot care more than you. You've got to provide that dedication, and it's your job to make the most of that. Again, if you don't have motivation, dedication, and accountability, odds are things aren't going to go as planned, and so hold off until you're there so you can make the most of it when you do make that investment. And then family support's a big one. Programs that pride themselves on support of their students, there's only so much support that can be provided. One of the big things that we see students not thinking about in terms of fit is being away from loved ones. If it's too far geographically and Zoom's not just going to cut it, that could be a major consideration of, are you in the best situation to be your best self in the classroom and while you're pursuing those other things. The other thing I want everyone to understand is that postbac programs cannot advise you properly if we don't know everything about you that's relevant to the application, of course. My best anecdote about this is somebody once applied to our program having taken 5 MCATs and had officially, not practice exams, real MCATs, and they were nowhere near even competitive for DO school or even podiatry. We're talking sub 490. And they were only interested in MD. They were not remotely interested in DO, and we didn't find out any of that until they had completed the entire postbac year. That's when they unveiled their 5 MCAT scores and said, so how are you going to get me into medical school? And we had to say, we never were. We just didn't know that until today. And so don't hide anything. We want to help you. Every program wants their students to succeed. That is without question. And we accept students that we are confident we can help. And we can only be confident about that, or accurately confident about that, if you're giving us all the information. Please understand that we work with students who aren't perfect for a living. You're not supposed to be perfect when you apply to a postbac program. That's why you need a postbac program. We know that, and we can help you get yourself to where you want to be, as long as you're being straight with us. But you got to be straight with yourselves first, okay? I want to address these linkages, which have multiple titles, which you see on these different entries. So linkages, pipelines, MOUs, articulation agreements, first looks, early assurance, all this stuff. And we've already alluded to some of these things at the bottom here, but all of these things have eligibility requirements that are usually set by the medical schools, not the programs themselves. So there's eligibility requirements. Are you even eligible for the pipeline? And once you're eligible, then there's performance requirements. How well are you actually doing in the program? And this is where that guarantee of success comes in. You have to perform. The program's not there to perform for you. You're there to perform in the program. And so get your hands on those details from programs if that's the reason you're choosing a program, which is a quite common priority for many students. And we all understand that as postbac program directors. The other thing about this language, the guaranteed interview versus the guaranteed acceptance. I love what Susan said about conditional. Please understand that if somebody says, yes, you're guaranteed an interview under these conditions, that is very, very different from a guaranteed acceptance if you meet those conditions, all right? Plenty of interviews can go sideways, or they can go very well, but just not well enough, and they only have so many seats to fill from that program. And so please be wary of the word guarantee. Do not assume it means what you want it to mean. Ask programs about that. It's a very important detail. And again, no program doesn't want you to understand what you're signing up for. Here on the left of the slide, you see 1+4 or 2+4 timelines. So Susan talked about how there's 1 and 2 year postbac and master's programs. So the +4 is your med school year. The 1 or the 2 is the length of time of your postbac opportunity. Okay. So lots of jargon in this realm of postbackery, so to speak. So always ask the programs. Just because one program says a certain thing about their partnership with a medical school doesn't mean that another program with a similar sounding partnership doesn't have a pretty significant difference in terms of those eligibility and performance requirements. Okay, folks? Okay, big question that we get in the realm of postbackery and masters is, how much is this going to help my GPA? All right, so what you're looking at right now is a mock-up of the AMCAS application of a verified application. So you see freshman through senior on the left-hand side here, then you see post-baccalaureate undergraduate, cumulative undergraduate, and graduate, okay? So if you do undergraduate post-bac work, this is telling you that there is a whole separate line for that work. And that's everything after you earn your bachelor's degree. Every undergraduate level class that you take goes in that row, okay? So if you graduate and then you take 3 classes and then you do a postbac program, an undergraduate postbac program, those first 3 classes that you took, assuming they're also undergraduate, and all of your postbac program coursework will go on this row. Okay, there isn't a special, oh, this is my program GPA row. It's everything you did after your bachelor's is earned at the undergraduate level. Okay, very important distinction between undergraduate and graduate postbac work is that the undergraduate postbac work gets factored in the cumulative undergraduate line, along with your freshman through senior year lines. So it's essentially like a super senior undergraduate year, and it still boosts your cumulative GPA. Okay, your cumulative undergraduate GPA. The graduate line, whether it's a special master's or an MBA or an MPH or microbiology, whatever the case may be, all of that graduate work goes below the cumulative undergraduate row in the graduate line, and that is not going to boost your undergraduate GPA number. Okay, so both undergraduate and graduate coursework is highlighted with a separate line on the AMCAS application. Okay, but only the undergraduate postbac work will boost the cumulative undergraduate GPA. Okay.
One other thing I would just point out to students is the hours or the credits are reported. So it's like, oh, look, I have a 4.0 postbac GPA. Oh, it's 8 credits. I mean, they see how many credits it is too, right? So see, obviously, how many credits it is going to influence how much it impacts your cumulative undergraduate, but they do see that number too, so that you should be cognizant of that. And if I could give one piece of advice to people early in their college careers, is be very, very cautious and conservative about accumulating credits. As your credits accumulate, it is increasingly challenging to change your GPA. If it's a 4.0, that's wonderful. If you have 120 credits and a 4.0, you can fail a couple classes and barely move that GPA. But if it's a 2.6 and you have 200 credits, it's going to be almost mathematically impossible to change it. So be very attentive to that.
Great point, Susan. Thank you. Just to show you what this looks like on a liaison app. So this could be CASPA or ACOMAS. Again, highlighted in yellow here, you see freshman through senior year, standard undergraduate. Again, you see post-baccalaureate undergraduate in blue. So yellow plus blue equals green. That's your cumulative undergraduate number there. And again, the graduate level is under here. For this particular thing, you see overall is here, depending on the application, that actually might combine cumulative undergraduate and graduate. How schools use that, though, I cannot speak for those kinds of things. They tend to focus on cumulative undergraduate, but I'm sure that they consider graduate work as well. And you should ask a graduate program, for those details. So just to finish up the slideshow here, so how do I pick a program? You need, first off, we mentioned accountability. You have to do a brutal, honest assessment of what your record has and doesn't have. What are you trying to address through a postbac program? You might address some things outside of a program and some other things within a program. But whatever it is you're trying to address, of course, pick a program that has as many of those things as possible that you can handle responsibly, right? One of the biggest reasons students need an academic enhancement program is they did all the fun stuff too much and the grades suffered. You don't want to repeat that mistake in a postbac program. Often trying to do too much is many people's downfall. So with that, I think we're done with our prepared statements, so to speak, and we're going to move on to questions. But thanks for watching.
Thank you, Susan and Bob, for the presentation. And I definitely hope I appreciate people enjoy at least the introduction as well. I guess you can feel free to take off the screen share here. And I did forget, probably would be nice and a courtesy for me to have you guys just briefly introduce what your programs are about. So I'll start with Susan and give us a little bit of a brief overview of what your postbac program is.
Thanks. So our postbac program is a non-degree, non-certificate program. It is both for grade enhancement as well as career changers. We provide the courses And predominantly our students are pre-med, but we certainly have pre-PA students, pre-dental students, and every once in a while a pre-vet student. And I will say with great pride, every single one of them has gotten into vet school. Our program is I would say more pick your own adventure. So one of the features in our program is you're going to meet right away after you're admitted with an intake advisor and develop your schedule. If your chemistry Gen Chem grades are fine, we're not going to force you to repeat that. And then you develop that schedule. And most of our students are with us for we run 3 semesters in a year, 3 or 4 semesters. And some of them take what I would call a full course load in terms of like an undergraduate of about 15, 16 credits, some less because they're working. So it has that flexibility. And here's what I'm going to always say about flexibility. It can be wonderful. It can be just enough rope to hang yourself to. And so that goes back to really knowing yourself. Can you take those courses and do everything else in your life? And here's another thing, if you take only one thing away. Credits for a class are associated with something called the Carnegie Rule, and they have to do with hours per week. In a semester, each credit means 3 hours of work per week. That can be both, in the lecture as well as outside. So if you are taking a 15 credit term, that presumes 45 hours of work per week for every week of that semester. Look at your schedule. Can you do that? The answer is probably not on top of everything you were doing prior to joining that program, I would think. But be really honest about that to make those adjustments as you go forward. And then I'll let Bob talk about his program.
Thank you, Susan. So I'll actually talk a little bit about programs that aren't mine very briefly, just because I get confused for other programs. So at Temple University, we have quite the postbac landscape. So I work for the College of Science and Technology on the undergraduate campus. Temple University also has Lewis Katz Medical School and Kornberg School of Dentistry. Lewis Katz has their own academic enhancer program, and Kornberg has their own academic enhancer postbac program, and they also have a separate master's program. I cannot speak officially on behalf of any of those programs, but in my undergrad capacity, my program again is at the undergrad level. I do support pre-meds and pre-dents primarily, along with pre-PAs, but much like Susan's programs, I'm happy to work with anybody who needs those prereqs and is looking for, a highly structured program. Speaking of structure, so I have 2 programs. I have a career changer program that takes 12 months and an academic enhancement program for the people who already have the prereqs, but they need a lot more runway, so to speak, either for the GPA and or the MCAT, of course. And we're highly, highly structured. We are designed to try to help students showcase who they are in medical school. It's all science, all year, nonstop. We call it a gauntlet, and we're not joking around. We say, it's not med school hard, but there's going to be times where you're a little bit in disbelief about how things could get harder. And so that's a little bit about us. We pride ourselves on our advising support, our MCAT support, and all those kinds of things, much like many programs do. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you both for at least giving us an idea. And I wanted to make sure we had a sense of what your programs do. And Bob, thank you for also clarifying. Sometimes it is a little bit confusing for a lot of students to look and find postbac programs, partly because they're in a lot of different places and obviously different units are organizing them or running them. So I guess one of the big questions, we don't really have an MSAR, or maybe I know there kind of is one, but let's just start from the basics and just talk about what resources exist so that students can really find programs in a convenient format, such as a directory. Obviously, we can go a little bit and discuss the application process regarding postbac casts, and we can discuss that too. But if a person is going to start out and try to find a postbac program, where do you start?
So just real fast, do we want Do we want us to be full screen on this, or do we want to be smaller on the screen with just the Q&A? I can do either one.
I think it's okay to be, I think you can take off the screen share.
Okay. Do you want to start the question again since I messed up the
Sure.
screen for that one?
Sure, that's fine. So obviously I'm glad that you both talked about your programs. I wanted to sort of have the sort of typical student who's trying to start off on a process to see what exactly is out there. So see what the landscape is really all about. There's not, I don't know if they probably don't know or probably don't realize if there are directories of postbac programs that exist. So how do students get a sense of exactly how many programs are available and the diversity of who runs them? We can talk about postbac CAS a little bit too, and in terms of how it also can serve as a directory, but I want to start with that, at least on a baseline.
Well, that's an ongoing issue. For medical school, for MD or allopathic schools, then the resource is MSAR, which AMC collates, monitors, and monetizes. There is a similar type of resource for DO schools, and that's choosedo.org. MSAR is a cost, ChooseDO is not. MSAR is, I would say, a little more robust and richer in terms of the amount of information in it than there is in ChooseDO. For postbacks, unfortunately, there is not. That's something Bob and I are trying to work on, but that there is not one thing for it. At the moment, probably a great starting place is if you go to AAMC, there is a separate web page that is postbac programs. They have the disclaimer, we are not responsible for any of this information. We are not recommending any of these programs. It's simply a list. There's ability to do some type of comparison and filtering, not an enormous amount. Some of the programs that are listed there are probably no longer current, if I have to be honest. So you should also, if you're using that resource, look at the last date it was updated. If that was more than, I would say, 2 years ago, I'd be suspicious. The National Association for Advisors for Health Professions, NAAHP, which we're all members of, can be a useful resource for students. Your undergraduate pre-health advisor is a really great resource. Hopefully they're a member of NAAHP and they can reach out to our committee and ask those questions. Obviously, Google can be your friend, but you don't always know what you're going to pull up with that too. And I think when Bob talked about Temple, right? It's like, well, there's 3 different postbac programs and 2 special masters, and I think that's often very confusing to someone when you first start with this, because you're like, well, I don't even understand what the difference between these programs are. Also, ask people who maybe have gone through them or have done this, that obviously, vet what they've said, but that's a reasonable starting place, right? If you have a state medical school, ask them, is there a program that they often send students to or recommend? That can be a good resource.
I don't have much to add other than, given who is interviewing us today, I'm sure that there's resources online there that you can find. I am not personally familiar with that, but Emil did mention Postbac CAS. So for those of you who don't know, Postbac CAS is run by the same organization that runs the AMCAS applications, the podiatry applications, and many other applications. So CAS stands for Centralized Application Service. And it's a great place to find active program info. So I totally agree with Susan that the AAMC database is a great resource. Some of the information is more up to date than others. The nice thing about Postbac CAS, we don't want anybody to be intimidated to do research on Postbac CAS, because you can make an account for free. They make their money through the applications themselves. You can do as much, hounding of programs and digging into the details through program profiles on that database. The most important thing to understand about Postbac CAS is that not all postbac programs are on there, right? So when you apply to AMCAS, you're applying to pretty much any MD or allopathic school in the continental US, with a few exceptions of some private schools out there. Texas is the most notable broad one. Texas is TMD-SAS. ACOMAS represents, I believe, every DO program in the country that's not under the umbrella of TMD-SAS in Texas once again. That is not, repeat, not the case with Postbac CAS. Some programs use it. Some have their own independent applications through their university's application portals, okay? So it is free. Dive into that, but it doesn't mean that those are your only options. I am on Postbac CAS as a Temple program, but I promise you that there's excellent programs out there that are not on Postbac CAS. And again, we don't have control over that. I'm sure Postbac CAS would love to have every Postbac program in the country using them for the application process. But it is free to do research on Postbac CAS. So I would strongly encourage everybody to give that a shot and see what you find. But I agree with everything else that Susan said. You know, talk with your advisors. Also, be kind to your advisors about post-bac landscape, particularly if they've been advising for, you know, just a year or three, somewhere in that realm. You know, your head might be spinning from the information that we share with you today. And many advisors, you know, they're focused on the freshman through senior year. This is what you do. And when somebody's left school for maybe a few years, now that playbook might not feel as reliable, and for good reason. So if they don't know everything, it's good that you're here. We don't know everything, but we are a lot more familiar with the landscape. But they're all very valuable resources, and they'll probably have programs that they can send you to for more information to get your deeper understanding of what you're in for.
Right.
And Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, many, I don't, and again, not all, many special masters would be on Postbac CAS, but a traditional master's program would not be, nor master's in public health.
I'm very confident that that is accurate, but I'm sure there may be like one or two exceptions that prove the rule.
Yeah, I think, and not every MPH program is on SOFIS, but a good number of them are. But I don't know how many of them also would be post-bac programs too. But again, I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that exactly what that post-bac CAS exists. It's a place, but it is not the comprehensive list for sure. I did, and Bob, I know Bob mentioned this because of the nature of the different post-bac programs at Temple for sure. And Susan, you did bring up the questions about who is your faculty and what are their responsibilities, what are their appointments and what do they have to do advising wise versus other things. So can we delve a little bit into some of the I can only write them off as saying advantages, disadvantages in terms of having a post-bac program be based in some sort of a university umbrella versus a professional school-based umbrella. So from your vantage point, and obviously, we're speaking in generalistic terms, not of our own personal, our own specific programs. I just want to get your thoughts about, what would be the advantage of going with an undergraduate advisor / teacher, faculty, and or versus a professional school faculty if they were exclusive and didn't cross over.
Sure. So this is a very important question, and I think this is definitely going to fall in the realm of we don't know all the different perturbations of these kinds of things. I will say this, I am not competing with Lewis Katz or Kornberg for pre-med or pre-dent students respectively. I do encourage students to apply to each of our programs, presuming that if they get into the professional school, they're probably going to go there for their post-bac experience because it's housed in a more clinically adjacent environment, if not directly involving more clinical experiences. The one thing I would say, and I feel like this is universal, but I should say that it very well may not be. Professional schools that house post-bac and or SMP programs are focused on getting students into their med school. specifically, there's definitely a spectrum of how supportive they're going to be of students who don't get into their medical school, how much they're supporting students applying elsewhere. So that would be a big question that I would ask those programs, unless that's their dream school kind of a thing. So I think that the quick answer is related to that. The benefit of a professional school house program is that you are more likely than not to be on a faster track into that school. But then the question is that your dream school where you want to end up? Or is that maybe number 9 on your top 10 list, but you don't want to sacrifice your 1 through 8, so to speak? And that could be why doing a program in a more general environment would be more supportive of, like, we don't care where you want to go. We're gonna support you 100% no matter what. And so that's the biggest bifurcation in my mind. But I tell students, what if I apply to both? I'm like, if you get into both, we'll wish you the best if you want to go to the dental school, because why wouldn't you? And we'll have a conversation about how the programs differ and those kinds of things. But like Susan said earlier, we know that you haven't dreamt of being postbac students your whole life. You have dreams of medicine and dentistry. And so I'm certainly not going to take it personally if you go to a program that's housed in one of those professional schools.
Yeah, and it obviously comes down to the program and then what you need. I mean, I think I would say, and I think I'd give this advice to even, someone looking at colleges is, what do you need? How do you learn? What kind of support do you need? And what is the primary job of those faculty, right? Is it to help you, or is your program a low priority? And that would be very, very school and program dependent, but spend the time looking at that.
Thanks for the answer. And I guess, again, it's very important to know some of these questions. And some of the questions I'm asking, we're doing this as a suggestion for other students who are inquiring to ask these questions of other programs. So thanks for we're playing testing in some of these questions too. But a popular question that often pops up, and part of it, I think, is the pre-med mindset, is trying to figure out requirements such as GPA requirements. We're going to set aside any testing requirements, but certainly for postbac programs, special master's programs, we want to try to figure out, how to navigate this GPA needle. And we want to figure out whether pre-meds, if there's a required minimum versus a functional minimum, how does this mindset occur, especially, and does it apply for postbac programs? I sent to both Susan and Bob a hypothetical, like if someone were to wanted to get into a postbac program that seems to require a higher undergraduate science GPA than what they have. So a prospective applicant has a 3.1 science undergrad GPA at the start of the postbac. But the medical school that they're linked with or affiliated with or they want to go to says that a 3.1 GPA actually falls below their 10th percentile of the incoming class. So I wanted to see if you've dealt with individuals that are very similar to that scenario, and how do you advise students, at least the ones that wind up working with you as students in your postbac programs, how do you help them kind of navigate this, I guess, this interesting conundrum they feel that they're in?
I had a student in my advising class who said, I don't know. All I have is a 3.6, and I keep reading on Reddit. I need to have a 3.8. I'm like, you need to stop reading that. I think it's really the difference between a percentile or a mean versus a true cutoff, right? Is like, those are different things. If there's a cutoff, you must be above it. But is it the mean or the percentile? It's the same thing. Holistic review does not mean there is no cutoff, right? You can have both of those things. Look at, again, if your GPA is lower, why? Where were the problems? Was it time management? Was it too much frat partying? Was it I had to work? Have you grown and learned from that? Maybe test that out. Take a one class, right? And see how you're doing. I don't ever want to say something is your last chance, unless I suppose it's the seventh MCAT. But if you go and do a postbac and do no better, then that isn't showing growth and understanding, right? So give yourself the time to show that you've actually taken in to heart that growth, those changes, maybe even saved the money if the finances are a pressure. I do think that, again, unless there is a true minimum, if it's, if you've are past their minimums, schools will look at you. There are many circumstances. I have in my program, I have students who have really poor undergrad GPAs, right? They didn't understand how to drop classes. A lot of times, it's first gen kids, their parents didn't understand the whole registrar system and what does it mean to withdraw versus drop? When does it show up on a transcript? Why can't I just take Gen Chem 3 times? They don't understand that till late in the process. And of course, the grades exist at that point. And so I think there is an understanding that, people come in from different places, but you need to show that growth. You need to show that this is you 2.0, right? And so that is pressure. And I always hate to say that to students because that feels very make or break, but you need to do this when you're ready and when you can dedicate the time to it. If you can't, step away, right? Because otherwise you will just damage your GPA.
Yeah, I'm going to say different things that are essentially the same thing that Susan just said. Not all 3-1s, and I'm only using 3-1 because that was the premise of this particular question. Not all 3-1s are created equal. If somebody's been a 3.0 to a 3.2 student all their undergraduate career, and so that averages out to a 3.1, that is totally different from somebody who, for maybe frivolous to serious medical or personal reasons, started off at a 2.2 or a 2.5 and thought that, wow, this is what college is vibe for 3 or 4 semesters, and then something snaps and boom, 3.7 and up for the last 3 to 4 semesters, maybe 5 semesters. I mean, the earlier that snap occurs, the better. I'm sure everyone already knows that. That is drastically different. And so that's just my version of we need to see growth. And the more that growth has already been established, the more likely a postbac program is going to help them make that statement after their bachelor's degree. So the way I advise my students and applicants on this is, so you have your bachelor's degree time, and for many postbac students, maybe a few years in since then in the workplace and maybe taking a class here or there. And you want your postbac year to be a statement. Or maybe years, right? Sorry, my program's 1 year, but there's 2-year programs out there. You want your postbac time to be a statement of who you are now academically. And you need to try to not try to make up for the past. You just want to showcase how great you are now. And then in many cases, at least in my program, most of my students take the MCAT after the program. So that statement needs a punctuation mark. And of course, we all want that punctuation mark to be an exclamation point. A good strong period on a statement is good too. We just don't want it to be a question mark. Because what you want the narrative to be, and narrative is, related to growth and who you are now, how you've become who you are. You want the narrative to be, yeah, I had some growing up to do. I did some of it at the tail end of college. Maybe I did some more after college, regardless of that scenario. But then I did this postbac year. And look how I either figured it out and crushed it, or crushed it having already figured it out. And then boom, look at that MCAT. And the stronger that end of the story is, the less every professional school is going to care how it started. And so what students want to hear, I'm assuming, is Just tell me the number I need. And I'll tell you the numbers are going to be very objective. You should know how to calculate a GPA. You know how many credits you have, you know what your GPA is, and you should know how many credits a program is. And you can play the what if game. What if I get a 4.0, 3.9, 3.8, 3.7? You know what that number, the best case scenario, is going to be. You don't have to ask a program. What you're asking is, how can I be competitive? And it's not about comparing it with the past. It's just the higher that number is now, and the better that MCAT statement is afterwards, that's who you are now. And so embrace the present, be great now. And just like Susan said, we're looking for growth. If you're worried about a postbac program being worth your investment, because it's a huge investment, time, money, energy, and anxiety, probably. What's going to make it worthwhile is when you know why it's going to go better than what happened before. And if you don't know, either find a program that makes you confident that you'll figure it out there, or wait. And I'll tell you what, when you wait, don't wait passively. It's like, all right, I'm not ready academically yet. I'm just going to hope that it goes well. Do not hope that it goes well. Optimism's good, but it's not a plan, right? So while you're waiting for that academic opportunity that you know you're going to, take by the horns, so to speak, go do the other things. Like, do I have enough clinical experience? You can always get more, and you can get paid for it. So the financial side of a postbac program maybe doesn't hurt so hard. Maybe you get research, maybe you do more service opportunity, but there's ways that you can develop those other very important aspects of your application while you save up money, gain motivation, awareness. What am I even doing this for? And that wait is very powerful, because one of two things will happen. You'll either be so much more motivated and aware of how science impacts the field that you'll be a new person just motivationally coming into a postbac opportunity, or you'll hate it and you'll just be like, wow, healthcare is rough, because it is. And you just saved yourself a bunch of time, money, and energy doing a postbac program in the pursuit of a lifestyle that you didn't even know you didn't want. And so the lower one's GPA is, the more time might be needed to separate oneself from the undergraduate version of themselves, figure things out, save some money, gain that motivation and perspective, and be ready to kill it. Now, no one likes that news, because everyone listening to this is probably going, no, but how do I get it as fast as possible? And another consideration that I won't spend too much time on is a big question is, so you want to be a physician, you got yourself a 3.1. How much do you want MD? And how open are you to DO or maybe podiatry, another form of the medical field? Because that'll play a huge role in how much of, a payoff you are, quote unquote, more guaranteed to have at the end of it all. And the more locked in on MD you are, the more patient you're going to need to be, the more excellent you're going to have to perform. And that's just the name of the game. And every advisor will tell you the same thing. And so anyone here who thinks like, just tell me what I need to do. Everyone is so different. That is impossible for a video to do. So yeah, I think I'll cut it there.
No, I appreciate it. I know for sure, and sort of related to the question, and as you guys are talking about it too, how helpful would you feel it would be for postbacs to give like some sort of internal demographic, such as this is the range of GPAs within the same level of statistic, some, quartile ranges or mid ranges. This is the GPAs from like the last couple of years of classes that we've admitted into our postbac program. Do you know if any schools or any programs do that, or would that be something that, if there were a good directory out there, would that be useful or helpful? Or could it also, obviously we know how it's working on the traditional admission side. So I wanted to get your thoughts on how it could be helpful for students to kind of give the type of guidance that we just heard here, Or will it just ramp up the anxiety? It's like, oh, I can't apply there because I'm below their 10th percentile of the student GPAs that got into this postbac program, because they're thinking like they would for medical school. I just wanted your ideas or thoughts about, at least giving students an idea of, the types of entering SGPA, science GPAs that you've had to deal with or you've worked with before.
Well, I think, I come from a science background. I think data is useful, but there would have to be agreed upon calculations, terms. For instance, if you use the postbac cast, then you're entering all of your grades, right? We know many institutions have grade forgiveness or grade replacement in terms of undergrad. So are you comparing apples to apples, right? I think that would be a huge issue. And then, of course, we get into, it's pass fail, it's competency, it's trimester, it's blah, blah, blah. So if you were truly comparing equal things, I think that could be helpful. I think it would ramp up anxiety. I mean, I think we all know that there are postbac programs out there that have very high entrance requirements. They generally have very high success rates. I don't think anyone's particularly surprised by that statement, right? And I guess, especially the older I get, I think there is value in, we ask kids to go to college at 18. Many of them are not ready, especially after COVID. And, we give them no space to reinvent themselves. And to me, that seems sad that something could be cut off for the rest of their life and they could be this amazing physician. One of my favorite students who's now in M3, first gen, didn't understand you shouldn't take organic chemistry that many times. And of course, then there's the whole bind of if I drop a class, I lose financial aid, all of these things that we do to undergrads, right, that make it very hard. And it can be hard to get out of that. So yeah, I think it'd be great if we had a way to compare our programs. I think that'd be useful for students. First, we'd have to have agreed upon standards, right? And metrics. And then I guess we'd have to have some independent body to, verify that. And what if you have programs that are pass fail? How do you put in special masters into that? So it's a great idea. I don't know, practically speaking, if it'd be done. What do you think, Bob?
So there's any number of ways you could approach this question. We're trying to collect data from more and more programs on the committee that we serve. This will not be ready for public distribution anytime soon because we need something resembling a consensus of the programs whose data would be there. And one of the things that we are asking programs to consider is sharing a hard line cutoff for their admissions process. And it's just, that's their schools, right? It's not committee approved or AMCAS or ACOMAS approved. It's just, hey, you're a postbac program. A student needs this, or they're not being considered. In terms of that GPA cutoff information, which is definitely out there on websites, cutoffs and prerequisites are loathed by many students and even advisors. And I get that, and I'm not trying to change their minds when I say what I'm about to say, but they are a gift regarding your time and money. If a program tells you that you need a 3.4 or don't bother, and you have a 3.35, don't bother. Okay, they mean it. They're publishing that number because they are not going to spend any time on your application. That does not mean that they think you're not good enough to be a doctor. Okay, not the people that you're emailing, not the directors, not the advisors. Those are institutionally set numbers based on data, as Susan mentioned, and they don't get a say in what that cutoff is. So don't take it personally and don't get mad at who might tell you if it's not a website. That just means that you need to go prove it elsewhere. Okay? Because they only invest in people above that line. But just like Susan said, there are plenty of programs out there who might want a 3.4 or higher, because obviously someone with a 3.4 projects to be more successful than somebody with a 3.1, but that has nothing to do with your upward trajectory, where you are now in terms of your personal health or maturity or awareness or all those kinds of things. And so just don't spend your time and money applying to programs that have hard requirements that you don't meet. Go elsewhere. There are other options. And another thing that maybe we should have opened with at the front is, I'll tell you right now, no one from my postbac program has ever gotten into Harvard. No one's ever gotten into Hopkins. No one's ever gotten into Duke. It doesn't mean they never will, but part of being a postbac student is understanding that you are pursuing a profession that is incredibly competitive in which to get into, period. And the tippy top schools don't owe postbac students anything. And so you can still be a doctor. You can still be a phenomenal doctor. But if you're trying to take advice from the internet that's based on this is how you get into Yale's medical school, you're gonna go crazy. And if you're doing the same thing with postbac programs, like, what do you mean Hopkins won't take me? You have to let that go, because there's a good chance you're never going to Johns Hopkins. And it's that same consideration with MD versus DO and those other things. Okay. So you can be a doctor. It might take longer. It's going to take a lot of work. And you might not go to the school that you were dreaming of as a freshman. If you can't get over that, no postbac program might be able to help you. And that's just the reality. So as a committee, we're trying to get postbac programs to be more overtly transparent about what those cutoffs are, if they in fact exist. If they don't have it on their website, you can always email them and ask. And if they tell you, well, we do holistic review, believe them. Because I'll tell you right now, my favorite story still to this day is from about 6 years ago, 7 years ago. We had a baseball player with a 2.6 who was a business major and didn't give a hoot about academics when he was a student. And he moved to New York, started volunteering with Little Leagues, which ended up him doing volunteer work in the ER. And he was transformed as a human over 5 years of that experience. We took a shot on him. He's a gynecologist in Northern Virginia right now, went to an MD school, having had a 2.6, but he had 5 years of growth on top of that 2.6, and he was one of my favorite students to this day. And nobody wants to wait 5 years, and maybe you don't have to, but that's why programs don't have GPA cutoffs if they don't have them. And if they do, and you don't meet them, walk away. I already talked about the MCAT in a different part of this recording. You don't meet their MCAT requirement. It doesn't mean try to get that. It means either get the med school score first and then go to that program, or walk away, go to a program that will help you grow and prepare you for the MCAT that's going to get you into medical school. So you're allowed to be frustrated by, oh, I can't go there. But don't let that dictate to you that, oh, I can't be the doctor or the dentist or the physician assistant, et cetera, that I want to be.
I mean, I think another challenge with like programs and GPAs and comparing them is, and then you get into the whole thing, grade enhancer, career changer. I mean, you could have a student who has, I can think of a former student who had a very high undergrad GPA. I think she was an English major, I think genuinely wanted to be a physician, and she genuinely hated science. So it was just miserable for everyone involved. Well, she was intellectually capable, right? So that becomes a big challenge too. And it isn't true that everyone can do science. So, or will like it. So that's a big factor too in all of this. So I think that makes it challenging, but I think it goes back to, as the prospective postbac student, or should I be a postbac student, take the time to know yourself. What are your strengths? How do you learn? What do you need? Your friend who is also in your same school may need different things. So really think about, what do you need?
I'm going to just briefly go for the question that about multiple MCATs and so forth. I don't know whether either of you, or you could probably just affirm if you did MCAT prep or not. Um, have you guys worked with someone who's taken the MCAT multiple times, probably even used up all the double AMC resources? I just want to get a sense of how do you advise people who've been trying a number of times, at least on the MCAT, and if you do have MCAT prep, what would you advise them to do if they wanted to try just one more time?
Well, the most number of MCATs of any of our students that I've seen get in, I've seen more MCATs, but get in was 4. Okay. They took 3 before they came to us. No, I don't know why. And then after they finished our program, they took that last MCAT. That last MCAT was a 511. We could argue, well, the postbac probably helped with that. Might have wanted to do that after MCAT 1, but that didn't happen. Um, I, it's interesting because we have this small number of students who have a good MCAT score and then they come to us. I think they probably did it to prove to themselves if it was worth it, although I suppose that was a risky thing to do. So occasionally that happens. Now, more often than not, it's a bad MCAT and that pushed them to us. It's better if there's no MCAT, right? Because you don't have to explain it, you don't have to show that growth from it. I don't think 1 or even 2 is a complete scarlet letter, but it's going to ask the question. You're creating the question of, do you listen to evidence? Do you follow evidence? And if the answer is I keep doing the same darn thing, like I had one student took it 3 times in 1 year, you know, that to me says this is all about magical thinking, right? So I think you can recover from that, but you need to show that you took that seriously and you made substantial changes, right? And those are not quick.
Absolutely. We don't have a hard line cutoff on MCATs, although I would probably kind of unofficially say if you've already taken it 4 or 5, we're out. Unless somebody was thinking about a possible career change on their application and they're like, I still want to shoot my shot, but I'm also working towards something else. Because we're big, we want students to get where they want to be. We will ask students that we're concerned about regarding their MCAT profile, how locked in on MD are you? Are you open to DO? And that's really just can we help you get to the point where you're satisfied with your investment? Because that's very important to the program. We also ask on our application, how did you prepare for the MCATs that you took? And the answers to that could also mean that we don't even interview them. So yeah, if that's how you prepared and that's the results, then we don't have a magic wand kind of approach. And that's part of our holistic review. And so again, it's dependent, but fewer times is better. I agree with, I love excuse me, particularly for the people who are fighting that GPA fight. The clean slate on the MCAT is only second to having a glowing MCAT score, because then they're only fighting one battle. They can win that, and then again that punctuation mark of, and behold my fresh MCAT score. I've actually come to a new perspective that if a student, because postbac programs are such an investment, the MCAT is such a huge question mark that a student can be a brand new student in a postbac program. The GPA is glowing now. That does not guarantee that the MCAT is going to magically be 520, even 510, 512. And while programs are heavily designed to help that MCAT success, the MCAT success comes beyond the classroom for 99.9 repeating of the students. And so if a student who is wondering, will a postbac program I'm talking like a structured, like it's tens of thousands of dollars kind of is it going to be worth my investment? I have absolutely no problem with, again, taking the MCAT before a postbac program, but not to just get into the postbac program. But can I hit a 512? Can I hit a 515? Can I hit the score that my undergrad advisor told me that they think I'm going to need for even a glowing postbac program to get me in? Because MCAT prep can be expensive if you need like private tutoring and stuff, but that is a drop in the bucket compared with how much postbac programs can cost. And so if someone's, making a fiscal decision, which I highly encourage, by the way, I have no problem with somebody wanting to answer that postbac question, or excuse me, that MCAT question first before investing in the prove it year in the classroom. And by the way, med schools care about both. So, oh, I got a 515 now. Look at me. Well, if you have a 3-1, they're probably still curious about, can you show us that you can handle our coursework, because that matters too.
Right.
Thanks.
You need
Yeah.
both. Right. You can't
Yeah.
just do one.
Yeah, we all see here. I know we've all heard the compensating argument so many times. I know we're going to run out of time relatively soon, so I do want to ask the question about etiquette. I mean, I'm sure you get a lot of prospective emails and calls and hopefully video interviews or appointments. I want to get a sense of, what about the etiquette of reaching out to postbac program directors. And if there is even a little bit of time, I know we kind of just briefly mentioned interviews as part of the process of getting in. I just want to get a sense of, what would you want ideally to have a professional presentation when it comes to asking about a postbac program and so forth from there, and interviewing and so forth.
Well, I would say present yourself as the professional you want to be, which means write a professional email. Don't say, "Hi, I got an email from someone and the email address was Goonie Bird." I'm like, what the heck? So be the professional, right? Do those things. If you have an appointment set up with them, show up for it. Don't be working out while you take the call. Have had that happen too. And so, be the professional you want to be. Be thoughtful, go into it, have a set of questions, right? This isn't necessarily the moment to tell your story in any length. It's like, is this the right program for me? Have some targeted, appropriate questions. Show you've done your research, right? Um, and just be professional. I mean, I know a funny thing to say, but it seems in short supply.
Yes, I mean, so first off, reach out to programs, but please reach out responsibly. And what do I mean by that? Don't just, I have a question and I want my question answered, please. Please visit their website. If you're emailing them, you're aware of the program, go to their website. Odds are the answer is there. If it's not, then you can say, hello, I totally agree with the professional email. Hi, I'm interested in your program. Tell them about yourself. Like, this is a little window for me, like either GPA or I graduated or I'm a senior. Just like elevator speech, just like who are you dealing with from my end, kind of a thing. I've discovered your program. I'm interested in your program and I've visited your website and I might have missed it, but and then your question. And better yet, and this is a big one for me personally, and I think most people would agree. Ask all your questions in one email. It doesn't mean that you have to think of every subsequent question based on like a yes or no. Not that. That's ridiculous. But don't have 20 questions, send one, get an answer, send another, get another answer, send another. Like, be thorough. This is what Susan was talking about, I believe partially, with be the professional that you want to be. Hello, I've done my due diligence researching your program. I'm very interested. And I see the following, and I had the following questions. I'm going to go, love this, because A, I can either answer them quickly if I can, or I might even set up an appointment with you. Just because like there's too many questions for me to write all of this. Maybe I can meet with you in the coming week or something like that. And People talk a lot about empathy. It's the number one word that pops up. It's like, oh, that's the kind of doctor I'm going to be. I'm going to be empathetic. You know how I consider somebody empathetic or where they are on the empathy spectrum? How they communicate with me. If you think that you're the only person on the planet, and why haven't you heard back yet? Not a good look. Not a good look. Not somebody I want to work with. So be respectful, be patient, be thorough. And when you apply, and this is becoming more and more of a concern, when you apply, yes, it's your postbac application and it's not your medical school application, and I get that. But act like you're applying to medical school, because we're looking for people who look like they're ready for medical school. And particularly if you don't look like you're ready for medical school with your metrics, you want to look like you belong in medical school in the way that you follow instructions, have attention to detail, and treat it like it's a dress rehearsal for your med school application, because that's what it is. And the more you take care of your business based on the instructions that have been spelled out very clearly on the vast majority of applications, that will impress us. If you think that it's our job to hold your hand through our application process, you're not getting in, because we're here to support you. We are not here to guide you by the hand at every step of the way. This is a computer. Here's the on button. This is called email. There are some things that you need to be ready to do, and you may or may not be absolutely shocked at what people are not able to do without. I once had a student call my assistant and ask them essentially to read them the website for them. And no, they did not have a visual impairment accommodation that was needed. All right. So I totally agree with Susan. And those are just some of the examples, big picture and specifically, that, I hate the expression fake it till you make it. But I'll tell you, if you want to be great, start practicing greatness. And even if you fall short, you're on your way. But so you got to start acting like you're a doctor, because if you don't start behaving like a doctor now, odds are real good you're never going to be a doctor. So get on it. Okay. So I have to excuse myself. Thank you so much for the time, Emil and Susan. I'm going to let you continue on and have a great rest of the session.
Thanks.
We appreciate it, Bob. Thank you. Susan, do you have anything to add?
I usually say to students every day in everything we do, this is for students, but it's for adults, for all of us, we create evidence. What's the picture it's painting? Is it evidence that shows that we're ready, we're mature, we're self-aware? Or is it evidence that we're impetuous and that we, think magical thinking will work? It's up for you. You can analyze that too. So think about that in everything you do.
Well, thank you, Susan. Let me see. I did have like two other questions,
Sure.
and probably for you in your specific situation. When you've admitted students, when is it a good time to disclose having had maybe accommodations previously, or maybe even if you notice something that you suggest to them, maybe they could be tested for possibly some learning challenges and maybe accommodations. Just want to see, how does this work for you and the students in your program?
Yeah, so when students are admitted, we give them kind of a guide to everything at the institution, student services, and we do say, if you've had accommodations in the past or you have contemplated applying for accommodations, please speak with them as soon as possible, right? Because it takes time. A reality of that, and I think as an institution, we are very good about that. Not that I think we should get a prize for that. I think everyone should do that. I think a tough conversation, though, is a lot of times students think that will be a very easy process for the MCAT or for medical school also. And it's a very different process. It's much more burdensome, much longer time frames. And you should not assume because you got accommodations in undergrad or in a postbac that, or on the SAT or the ACT, that you would get it on the MCAT or you will get it in medical school. And it really is incumbent on students to look into those things very, very early on. That might factor in even their school list. They may have certain learning accommodations that some schools will not make.
Great. I've had one person on the forums talk about, and I'm sure there's many others that talk about, doing a postdoc or postbac, I should say. And when they were doing a postbac, something happened. They kind of failed out, struggled, whatever they did with their postbac. What are your thoughts about, okay, something happened to you. It was not necessarily academic, but it was something that clearly happened to you, distracted you from your course. What are your thoughts about either taking a different postbac or in your situation, you probably can extend to a second year. I just want to get a sense of how do you work, what happens with that person? How do you encourage them? Would you, because they're like thinking maybe I could just do a different postbac at a different program and then get into a special master. So they're doing they're hopping
Mhm.
to try to get into
Mhm.
medical school. I just wanted to see if what your experience was or your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that, like anything, if there's an elephant in the room, you need to address the elephant in the room. If something happened, and I can think of a former student, that there was a very serious medical mental health issue during the postbac, they stepped away. Unfortunately, they stepped away before or after they had done poorly in some classes, but did come back, took some time off, came back, was very willing to talk about that, not only with us in terms of, okay, if you come back, what are the support systems you need in place? How is this going to be successful? Because we don't want you to spend your money if this can't be successful. And how are you going to talk about this to schools? Because nobody can make guarantees. However, they again want that self-awareness, right? And this student had a great deal of maturity, was able to talk about those things, and did get in to a program. And so I think it's possible. But again, you can't pretend it's not there. You can't go to one post back and say, oh, I'll just go to another one. All of those grades just keep a tally going, and you're going to have to address that issue. And time can heal, and it can give you the time to think about how can I talk about this? How can I show I have that growth? This is where I think letters of rec can also be very helpful. If you as a student are comfortable with, and sometimes when that's happened, I have said to students, are you comfortable with me talking about this in your letter? If you're not, I will not bring it up. But if you are, I can maybe help address those issues. I can't guarantee the school is going to care, but I can try. And so I think those things can help. But of course, that means that that student had to tell me those things, had to trust me. We had that type of a relationship. So that isn't always going to be true. This is one of these things, and I'm going to preface this with obviously I am not a physician, is like think about this from the perspective of, what would you want your patients to tell you? Your patients not being honest with you isn't going to help you help them. You've got to be honest with these programs, whether it's a post-bac program or your graduate program, if you are going to be successful in. They don't want you to fail, right? And that was like one of Bob's early slides, like you got to be honest with us. We can potentially work with you and help you, but you've got to be honest.
Sure. Well, let me, I do have to wrap up our conversation. And I know there's plenty more questions that I probably already prepared. Hopefully a different conversation will happen and maybe in some future we'll talk about this again for anybody else who's interested. But I appreciate your time. I appreciate Bob's time to kind of help us with at least give a little bit more deeper about looking at postbac programs and why are they there and what applicants should know about it. So I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for arranging this.
All right. Have a good rest of your day, and I'm going to stop the recording.